Welcome to the Eagleton Institute of Politics and our The Morning After program. It's wonderful to see those of you that are here in the room and for those of you that are joining us online. Welcome to this historic day and this historic program. My name is Saladin Ambar. I am the senior scholar at the Center on the American Governor here at Eagleton and a professor in the Department of Political Science here at Rutgers University, New Brunswick. Today, we're going to dig into the results of yesterday's elections, but first I would like to just share a little bit about the Gambaccini Civic Engagement Series. This series was designed to promote civic engagement through an annual discussion of timely and enduring issues of great significance with the objective of generating real civil discourse and action. The program was established through the generous support of Lou Gambaccini's family, friends, and colleagues to honor his outstanding legacy in public service and his lifelong dedication to upholding the highest standards of civic responsibility, always striving and inspiring others to leave communities better and more beautiful than they found them. So we're really honored to have you in this civic engagement celebration. Today, I'm going to introduce our guests in order of their appearance. For those of you that are here, you have a code on your flyer for the more detailed and rich analysis of their backgrounds. But for the sake of brevity, I'm going to keep the introductions short. Those of you that are watching online, you can look in the chat for the more extensive bios. Up first, we have Nancy Solomon, former reporter and editor at WNYC and current host of Ask Governor Murphy, and host and producer of the podcast Dead End, a New Jersey political murder mystery. Following Nancy, we have Brent Johnson, politics reporter at NJ Advanced Media and online politics producer and reporter at the Star Ledger. Next up, we have our own Jean Sinzdak, associate director of the Center of American Women and Politics. Next up, David Cruz, our longtime New Jersey politics commentator here in the state and host of the podcasts Presscore and Hold That Thought. Regina M. Egea is the founder and chair of the Garden State Initiative. And last but not least, Mo Butler, partner of Mercury Public Affairs. So thank you all for joining us, and we're going to dig right into it in order of appearance from my left to right. We would like you all to just share 3 minutes worth of your initial reflections, reactions to yesterday's elections. Nancy, get us going.
Hi, everybody. I guess I would have to start with turnout and the difference in expectations from the polls that we were reading and hearing about and what actually happened with Mikey Sherrill's decisive double-digit win last night. And I would say that, I've been saying this for weeks to anyone who would listen to me, that the polls are only so good as if people turn out. And so you can call someone up on the phone and they can tell you which candidate they like, but that doesn't mean they're actually going to make it to the poll on election day. So I think that's where we saw a real difference. And even the poll, there was one poll that came out about an enthusiasm and the enthusiasm gap, and that Jack Ciattarelli, the Republican, had more enthusiasm among his followers than that Democrats were feeling towards Mikey Sherrill. And I think yesterday was a complete repudiation of that. Maybe it was not enthusiasm for Mikey Sherrill, but it was certainly enthusiasm to turn out and vote against Donald Trump, I would say. People say, well, what was the most important issue in the election? And I don't think, you could argue that it was anything but Donald Trump. I mean, affordability, blah, blah, blah. Democrats turned out because they were upset about the way our government is going, the way politics are going, and I believe that's exactly what was motivating people. And I say that having argued at the beginning of this race that New Jersey gubernatorial elections aren't about national politics, and they have their own dynamics and concerns, and that people were going to be voting about their high property taxes and the lack of affordability. And I think yesterday's results just really turned that upside down. I'd also say that Mikey Sherrill is just a really strong candidate for New Jersey statewide elections. That she is a moderate with a military background, as most people have heard over and over and over again, and that is something that's going to perform really well in moderate suburban New Jersey. And then I think one of the big questions I had going into after the primary and going into the general was whether the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, the base, the folks who turn out in low turnout elections like anything that's not a presidential election, whether she was going to be able to make an olive branch to the progressives who had preferred other candidates in the race, and whether she would sort of assuage their concerns that she was, too moderate, almost too conservative, for them, too conservative. And I think progressives just turned out en masse to not just to vote for her, but to canvass for her. I went to a watch party last night with a bunch of activists in Maplewood, New Jersey from Soma Action, who had been knocking on doors for a couple of months. They hadn't supported Mikey Sherrill in the primary, but they were out in number, working for her campaign, knocking on doors. And I think what they told me was that the secret sauce of turning the tide among the base for Mikey Sherrill was Andy Kim, and that he had met with progressive groups. There had been statewide meetings on, I assume on Zoom, and that Kim had made a passionate argument for why progressives needed to get behind Mikey Sherrill. And so I think what we saw yesterday was a coalition of the progressive base of the party getting out the vote, and moderate voters turned off by Donald Trump going with Mikey Sherrill. How am I doing on time?
You're good. I think
7 minutes.
7 minutes. I'll keep talking,
No.
but I can also stop.
No, I'll come back to you. How
Okay,
about
sure.
that? Let's go on to Brent.
So this is the fourth governor's race I've covered in my 16-year career covering politics at the Star Ledger and NJ.com. And it was by far the most heated, it seemed like the candidates really hated each other. It was personal, and the polls were kind of all over the place. She was always in the lead for the most part, but it was anywhere from 1 to 10 points, and there was a dead heat poll from a good pollster recently, and it was a lot to wrap your head. There was a lot of layers to this race, and then there was the Donald Trump factor. Was it going to help? Was it going to hurt? My head was dizzy, and still is on 2 hours of sleep. But what I think was most shocking yesterday was the size of her victory. No polls predicted 13 points, maybe some internals or something. And no one, the insiders that I were talking to were like, oh, she's going to win by double digits. It was more like, well, let's just hope she wins. And I think there was a shock on the Republican side to see his enthusiasm just not be there. Especially 4 years after he came so close to pulling off an upset, that there was just a lot of scratched heads this morning and a lot of trying to figure this all out. And we'll learn more as the days go ahead. But yeah, everything Nancy said is true. It seemed that this was a very big anti-Trump vote. You saw 5 counties that he won last year switch back to the Democratic side, and that tells that's the statistical story right there. And then there's also, it was more about anti-Trump than anti-Murphy, and a lot of historical trends were broken yesterday. The last time one party has won 3 governor's races in a row here, which the Democrats just did, was 1961, which I always say was 3 years before the Beatles even appeared on Ed Sullivan, and a year before my beloved New York Mets even existed. So there's a lot to unpack in this and what happened.
Thank you. Jean?
Because I'm the Center for American Women in Politics, obviously, have you heard there's a woman governor, right? That's our breaking news. The context, I will give you some of the numbers on the context for how women candidates did, and then a few takeaways that I had. But there will be, come January, a record 14 women serving as governors in this country. It is a record. It was briefly met earlier this year for about 2 weeks until there was some shifting, but we're going to go back to the high water mark officially. Obviously, Mikey Sherrill is the second woman, the first Democratic woman to be elected governor of New Jersey, she's the first woman military veteran to be elected as an American governor anywhere in the country. You know, we were saying, and a little bit in jest, but we do have our first male lieutenant governor in the state of New Jersey. So Dale Caldwell has, I guess, broken that glass ceiling. And then obviously Spanberger is the first woman governor of Virginia, and State Senator Ghazala Hamshi is the first Asian American Pacific Islander woman to serve as Virginia's lieutenant governor and in statewide elected executive office in Virginia, and the first Democratic woman to serve. In terms of the legislature in New Jersey, we did not have a record high number of women candidates for the assembly this year. There are currently 10 women candidates in races that are too close to call. However, based on our current results, so we can't say for sure whether women's representation in the legislature is going to go up or down or stay steady, but we do know women are going to fall short of the current record for the number of women serving the legislature, which is 43. Right now there's 40 women serving. We're not going to beat 43, even if many of these women win their races. In Virginia, however, the Virginia General Assembly race, women's representation will increase. It will be a record number. So women will surpass the current record for the number of women in the General Assembly and in the overall and in the Virginia House of Delegates. And it is worth noting in Virginia that 8 women challengers, all Democrats, flipped seats in the Virginia Assembly. Only 1 male challenger has flipped a seat so far. And then there were some other, wins, gains for women. New women have been elected as mayors to 3 of the nation's top 100 most populous cities. And I can get into all the details of that, but I know I'm about to run out of time. I think I'm getting. But I do want to just say 2 points. One of these, something we've talked about a long time, and our director, Debbie Walsh, has a quote about it in our press release that's going out that you should all read. But, the women candidates that won, this is a big year for women candidates, and the women candidates that won at the top of the ticket in Virginia and New Jersey really should put to rest the electability question. We get it constantly. Women can get elected to executive positions. We need to stop talking about it. We would prefer to stop being asked about it. We know that they can win. And then also I want to say one of my other colleagues mentioned last night that the sort of blue wave that we saw and the wins, like keep putting the wins for women in the columns as we're tracking women candidates, felt like 2018 to her. And that year I remarked to a reporter that it was really women and people of color that drove that change in 2018, and that's what it's a smaller election this year, but that's what it feels like. And so, we can talk more about that, but David?
Hi. In Jersey City, we would call this an ass kicking. It's a technical term. I don't want to get too technical, but I mean, that's the obvious headline. But the turnout was also a big thing. I mean, there were like 160,000 votes in Hudson County, which is, that's old school type stuff. You don't really see that much anymore. So that was very significant. To me, if you get 50% turnout, some countries around the world look at us and we're like, only 50%. But for us, that's pretty good, 50% of voters coming out. And the Democrats really swept it all. They flipped seats in the assembly, which I don't think anybody up here thought was going to be the case. Certainly like 4 or 5 of them have been flipped. But let me say this, having observed this campaign, and it's been 2 years, despite the fact that it only seems like the election was 1 week, but it's been 2 years for us who cover this stuff of watching this. So I will say that Mikey Sherrill ran a terrible campaign with, an 800,000 plus advantage of Democratic voters. You would think, well, why don't they kick everybody's ass all the time? She was terrible, but at the last maybe 2 weeks, I think that she found her footing and realized that she had this support that was there. All she had to do was give them a reason to vote for her. And I think towards the end, the reason was Donald Trump. And that ultimately is the big difference in this race. I mentioned last night that Steve Fulop, who was poking his finger in the eye of Democrats for the last year, he said that if Donald Trump wasn't in the White House, then Jack Ciattarelli would have won by 12 points.
Yeah,
So
I've had multiple people tell me the same thing.
yeah, my logic is that based on Steve Fulop's math, she still won, only by 2 points though. So I don't know if this really represents a blue wave. You know, we talk about, somebody mentioned that this is the first time that Democrats have won 3 terms in New Jersey since 1960 something. 61. I was not born yet.
Neither was I.
Okay.
Neither was
But you don't really know. I mean, the context of every election is right now, today. It doesn't matter really. I mean, you can take a macro look and say, oh, look, the Democrats did this and so on and so on. But ultimately, it comes down to what's happening in the street, as it were, that election day. And I think that it was Trump, and the feeling that he has given a lot of people in general, but Democrats in particular, that stuff is out of control and we need to stop what is happening. Like if someone held up a sign that said time, which is all the time I have, so.
Wonderful. Regina, please.
Thanks. Well, I'll talk for both a Republican as well as a policy point of view here in New Jersey. And to Brent's point, there are a lot of layers. I think we're all going to learn, subsequently about the last campaign. But it was very interesting. I thought I would say actually 30 days, where there was a definite tone change in the Cheryl campaign, and the commercials were all recut, right, to have a lot more energy and a lot more talking points than she had before about her resume. And also then, of course, bringing in the strong anti-MAGA message and painting anybody who's on the ticket with the same message. And what I think is, kind of a difficult night, obviously, for Republicans. And I think it went down ballot. District 21 was, I think, very surprising, as well as maybe Christian Barranco. I'm not sure that one is settled yet. But what's, I think, really the good news out of what happened was that I think the Cheryl campaign was trying to cover all of her bases. So they actually brought in some populist policy positions that Jack was really being buoyed by. Energy, for one, that we need a broader portfolio and to bring those costs down. Taxes are too high. It made Cheryl move to say, I'm not going to raise the sales tax. I mean, I would have liked more taxes being capped, but brought her to that point. And to talk about property taxes, and she was actually pretty specific about talking about, do we really need all these school districts? And what about the public employees' health benefits plan? They need to be reformed. So it really made her move to some positions that I think are economically important. And now the challenge, of course, and as Saladin said at the beginning, I founded the Garden State Initiative, which is a policy house. And the job really now for the policy individuals is to hold the candidate, the governor-elect, now accountable. Like, are we really going to see the changes in the public employee benefits? Are we really going to see a change in energy? And that's really the job we've got. And I think, actually, to some of the points about who was running the campaign, that the selection of the cabinet now will be essential to deliver on those campaign promises that are out there. And I think that'll be the next hurdle that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about today. But I think for New Jersey, actually, those policy wins will be good news. And we'll see from a party perspective, the Republicans will be able to. We'll find out. I think they never really recovered from the bitter primary campaign on the Republican side, and that we'll see if that is a wound that won't shine, or will scab over, and we'll be able to recover from it. And that'll be the work, I think, going ahead. So,
Thank you. Mo?
Yeah, for For a split second, New Jersey was at the center of the political universe within this country, which was kind of cool. For a split second, we were a battleground state. And you know, we know a little about battleground states. We know a little about presidential competitive primaries, because I know, David, you went around when Booker ran for president, and we were in cool places like Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina. The energy around that was something I had never seen in New Jersey until this election cycle, actually. And, you know, to anyone who would listen, when they would ask me about this race, I would say, this is going to be really competitive. This is going to be tight. I did not see what occurred last night coming. I just didn't see it. In fact, I was so confident that this was going to be a tight race that, like, right after the primary, I got into a little wager with this guy, Adam Silverstein, who's a political operative of Bergen County. He's Cory Booker's campaign manager. And I said, you know, I will buy you the most exquisite meal if Mikey pulls this thing off by more than 10 points, because he was of the opinion that Mike was going to pull it back in June, that he was going to pull this thing off by more than 10 points. I said, you're out of your mind, you're crazy, it's not happening. Well, it shows how much I know. And it cost me. It cost me an exquisite meal. And
you can just say that Applebee's is lovely.
Yeah, exactly. He probably doesn't know the difference. And so, but you look at this, you look at the signals, like your sort of data points. You look at what happened in 21. It's a complete surprise. Although it shouldn't have been a surprise, it was a complete surprise. You look what happened last year. Right? So you see New Jersey becoming more competitive, and you see sort of the undercurrent. There's an issue within the Democratic Party among Latino voters, primarily Latino men. There's an issue within the African American community. I mean, sometimes I have conversations with some of my Republican friends about what their algorithm sends them and what it sends me. And what it sends me is that there is a problem within the Mikey campaign as it relates to urban centers and relates to African Americans in particular. And so I see this and I'm like, okay, there are these troubling signs. And then the campaign starts to focus in on these areas. You start to see the campaign schedule, start to see the messaging, you start to see the surrogates that are coming in, and you start to see like where she's hanging out. Places like Passaic County or like Houston, we have a problem. So, I was, when the results came in as early as they did last night, and as overwhelmingly in her favor as they did last night, I was totally surprised, to be frank. My friend wasn't, but I was totally surprised. And I talked to him a little bit about it, just to like sort of glean, like, you know, why was he so confident that she would win by 10 points? And he said, it's a couple things. One, we were comparing apples and oranges. In the presidential election last year, you had a plethora of low propensity voters come out, both African American, white male, and Latino. They don't vote. They came out in the presidential and they came out overwhelmingly in favor of Trump. He said, this election will snap back to the norm, right? So they'll look like a typical New Jersey gubernatorial election. Now, if he had told me that, when he told me that in June, I didn't believe him. I kind of believe him now. And I think the other thing that happened was, you know, there was this narrative that her campaign was really flailing when it came to reaching out to sort of urban communities. She didn't bring everybody back together under the tent right after the primary. That the campaign got started late. I mean, there was all this consternation among the base and sort of, you know, Democratic political operatives. And if you listen to her and her team speak, they were very methodical about how they were bringing everybody back together. It took time. It took more time than I would have liked, and I think other political operatives would have liked. But they were methodically sort of doing work. And I think one of the key pieces to sort of bring everybody back under the tent was getting the mayor of Newark under the tent, in the fold, and being a forceful advocate, because there was a clear weakness within that community. And once they got him under the fold, they got him focused. He understood this. He started to understand the stakes a little more, and I think Trump helped him understand the stakes with what he saw in Chicago and Portland and these other places. He was out there campaigning as if it was his last campaign. And I was a part of some of these, like, sort of African-American men meetings that were taking place throughout the state. And it was the opposite of what I saw when I was in maybe before the last presidential, when I was in South Carolina with Clyburn doing Black Barbershop tour. Sorry, just 2 seconds. There was all this antipathy towards the Democratic Party, right? Towards the Democratic leadership. You haven't thought of, we're not. There isn't a policy platform that speaks specifically to us. This election was dramatically different. It wasn't just political operatives in these rooms. It was rank and file, regular folk in those rooms, understanding what the stakes were. I think because of what they were seeing on television and what they were reading.
Well, I read, probably like some of you, that there was a poll that showed an 18-point deficit for Mikey Sherrill among African-American voters in the state, and I said, I don't know who these black folks are, but
I was with you.
I'm sure they exist. But so the whole polling and the surprises that we all have in any number of demographic or turnout models, I think is always important to keep in mind. I want to have us all think about, if you don't mind, what are the maybe initial and perhaps long-term lessons that both parties in the state may derive from this outcome? Because again, I think you're right. Very few people, if any, saw a double-digit victory for Mikey Sherrill. What are the lessons that they're going to draw, or maybe should draw, both parties, from this outcome? And whoever wants to.
I don't think the Democrats learned any lessons. I think their whole strategy was, hey, we got an 800,000 vote advantage, and the cities are going to turn out for us, black voters, Latino voters. So it turned out great for them. So they learned nothing, I think, from this other than it worked. I think the bigger question is now, what happens to Republicans in the state?
Exactly.
What kind of party are they going to be? Are they going to be Tom Kaine Republicans? Raise your hand if you know who Tom Kaine Sr. is.
Senior, not junior.
That's impressive.
wonderful.
That's
Senior. Yeah, all right.
Political students.
So are they the party of Tom Kaine, or are they the party of Bill Spadia? So I think that's the debate that's going to go on over, I don't know, whatever, until the next election. Republicans are going to have to learn the lesson of what happened here, and Democrats are blithely going on their way.
This is what I'll say, David. I'll say, so I think, I don't know, I don't want to say it's a lesson. I think there's some nuggets they took away from, because there
Democrats?
there was a debate on whether or not the same sort of 2018 strategy will work in 2025, right? So they're doing the same thing all over again. They're just attacking Trump, and we don't know where that's going to land, right? And so when I would talk to reporters, that's what they ask. We don't know if this is going to get her over the finish line. You know, talking about being a Navy pilot, helicopter pilot, and attacking Trump. And so I think what they're going to take away is that Trump is the gift that keeps giving. Totally. That's what I think that they're going to take away, and they're going to use that as sort of the wind at their sail as they head into the midterm election.
Brent, do you want to?
Yeah, more generally, the other thing is that politics is a weird, wacky place these days. Like, when I started covering, like if I look back at the first governor's race I covered, which was when Chris Christie wiped the floor with Barbara Buono in 2013, it was a much different thing to like think about what politics was. You know, Chris Christie in many ways was a unicorn back then with the way he talked, and you know, the joke was back then that you'd come away from a Christie event with 5 different stories. Then when you got to Phil Murphy, you came away wondering what was the lead of it. Like so but it's a different world now with Trump dominating things, and all politics used to be local. Now all politics is national, and it's a different polls are it's tough. It's more tough to trust polls now. We just have to recalibrate how we think about politics now. It's now like blood sport with like circus like lights. Like it's so it's hard to gauge those things because, you know, maybe everyone thought this was going to be so close, and really it was just that, you know, there was such a fervent thought of what to think about Donald Trump and national politics that sometimes you got to throw caution to the wind these days and be like, maybe we really don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear, Regina, you address, you know, what might be some of the lessons or the thinking of the New Jersey Republican Party. But before I launch that question, I just want to say that I disagree with you, David, that every election is different, and this whole thing about, oh, not since 1961 really is irrelevant, because I think what we're seeing is a real realignment in New Jersey, and that the Republican Party has become nearly irrelevant. And it was thought that the one thing the party could do was win the governor's seat, and now they've shown they can't do that. So I guess I would put a little charge to my question to you. You know, what the hell is the party thinking that they can, in a very moderate place like New Jersey, they can get away with MAGA?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. I don't know that the Republican Party decided, hey, let's turn into the party of MAGA. It just happened, you know, and the establishment got very comfortable, I think, and activists became the controllers of the narrative.
Well,
In 4 years, does that happen? I don't know.
Yeah, I do think it matters what year it is, right? In terms of, do you have the foil of, you know, somebody who's very unpopular to advocate against? Look, I wouldn't speak for the whole Republican Party, obviously, but my perspective, you know, is that what happened will be jolting, obviously, because everyone thought it was going to be, you know, so close. But I also, you know, think that the idea that these policies that did get talked about, people will be looking for them much closer. The higher engagement is making them much more sensitive to, why is my utility bill going up 25%? Why are my taxes going up higher than, you know, they've ever been before? And they've become a little bit more educated, which I think will be great in terms of really pressing on. You can make all the promises you want about affordability and blah, blah, blah. I think you said, Nancy, right? But I think the engagement level is much higher, and that is what I think the core Republican value proposition always was, you know, in terms of economics and having a much more Tom Kean Sr., I think, you know, approach to it, I think will be a path that will have to be one that, you know, gets pursued. Because unless, you know, Governor-elect Sherrill can really pull the party together, and nobody's been talking about, there are a lot of new Assembly Democratic members who are, you know, see themselves as relatively, you know, independent and activist. Will she really be able to, you know, manage through that assembly and keep the caucus together such that they can deliver on the promises? Because you haven't asked me about it yet, but I'm sure you're going to, about the challenges of the next two budgets for the new governor coming in are extraordinary, with all the promises that are made by Stay in New Jersey, Anchor New Jersey, and all of the commitments that are out there, and the depleting surplus that really has been fueling all the spending for the last several years is not going to be easy for somebody really in Washington previously to this and not really know the hallways and, as we say, where the light switches are in Trenton.
I had a Republican lawmaker on the phone while I was in the parking lot coming in here mentioned that same thing to me. Like, okay, now once the party's over, they're going to realize that the fiscal shape of this state is going to be a real challenge starting next year. Like, welcome to Trenton, Mikey. It's going to be a difficult road.
Yeah. There's also a parallel between Mikey Sherrill and Phil Murphy, in the sense that they couldn't point to 10 legislators in a room of legislators, right? And so they need someone who can, we were talking about this before, there's a guy named George Helmy. He was temporarily a U.S. Senator, but he was Chief of Staff to Governor Murphy. And he's credited with righting the ship, because the early days of the Murphy administration were a little like this. And so what Mikey Sherrill needs, I think, is someone with the experience of someone like George Helmy, who can point out who the key legislators are, and find out what agenda items she may have that have a chance of making it, or how they're going to get to that point to make it.
Well, you all are stealing my thunder about the next question, which is, you know, I think we all know that, you know, administrations in many ways become successful really during the transition period. I mean, these next months are really going to tell the story of maybe the next several years. What are you going to be looking for in this transitional period, whether it's nominations or people surrounding the governor-elect? What are the telltale signs that the governor-elect is either going to be getting it right or maybe not so right going forward in this, you know, very critical transition period that we probably don't pay nearly enough attention to. Gina, I see you there, kind of.
Well, one thing I was going to mention is for years, for decades now, the center has been doing a project called the Bipartisan Coalition for Women's Appointments. And so one of the things that we do, and we convene it every year, there's an open gubernatorial race. So we did that this year. And we asked the candidates to make pledges to appoint, particularly more women to their cabinet, but then also really make sure that the women that they're appointing reflect the diversity of the state. And as one of the most diverse states in the country, that's really critical. And because the New Jersey governor has so much power, they appoint their whole cabinet, they appoint hundreds of people to these boards and commissions. There are hundreds of boards and commissions at the state level. So we do ask the candidates to make a pledge to do this, and I will say the Cheryl campaign is the only, we asked both campaigns. The Chitterelli campaign did not return the questionnaire. They didn't respond to us in any way. The Cheryl campaign did. I do want to just take this moment to push back slightly on David. I mean, I know there's lots of well,
Sorry.
I mean, it's funny, like I'm not a pundit, I just play one on conference panels. But, the idea that she ran a terrible campaign, I mean, I know everyone says that, and I'm not a campaign watcher in that way, but, she won basically every demographic in the state except for white men and, white voters overall, I guess. I don't, to look at the numbers. But, and there was a pretty sizable gender gap in her favor. And so, does she have to continue to work to bring this coalition together and think about that? But clearly voters were okay with, wanted it, whether it was response to Trump, but also I think there are a lot of, there was a blue wave in, 2017, 2018, all that. So there's I felt like the media may missed some of these, like, especially women voters out there and what they were thinking, because it seems so overwhelming in her favor. So anyway, I'm just saying that as I think that's something that would be a good thing for the Democratic Party to take away. What does this mean now? But all of that is to go back to say that what we'll be watching, the center will be watching, is what Cheryl's transition team does in terms of who's on the transition team, and then who they are thinking about in terms of appointing the cabinet, and then in the really super high level position. I will, just for historical note, basically every governor had done slightly better in appointing women to their cabinet. Phil Murphy's high water mark was 67%. So we're not saying that anyone has to best that. He did do pretty well in terms of gender representation in his cabinet during his time. So.
Okay, great. Anyone else on the transition and what you're going to be looking for?
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And so to what Jean said about this, it's interesting. The critique of her campaign, I'll start there real quick, is there was a critique during the primary, there was a critique during the general. Yeah. And she destroyed it. She rolled over everybody. Yeah. So like we got to re-examine that critique, right? Like we just got to re-examine it.
Stop saying that.
Yeah. But we're going to be paying. I think we're going to be paying particular attention to what her policy priorities will be, right? What is she going to focus on? What are the first 100 days going to look like, right? And so we're going to be paying particular attention to that, and also we're going to be paying attention to, the folks she starts to announce as her inner circle, as her commissioners, because that'll give you a window into, to be frank, if this is a serious, like if this is going to be a serious administration from the outset or not. And we'll all know, like we'll all know by the names and the people that are surfaced, this, that, and the other. Like we all knew when this guy George Helmy, when he was selected to go into the front office, I had worked with him in Senator Booker's office, that he's a very serious guy, and I knew that he was going to make sure that the trains run on time, and he was going to right the ship. So that's how we'll know, how serious this is.
And he's a Mets fan, so.
Yeah.
I agree with Mo in terms of it be very obvious, I think, who gets appointed. And I would contrast the transition teams, not George, because I thought George was a great, both in the Booker office as well as chief of staff. But the transition teams that were appointed at the beginning of Governor Murphy's were laughed about, quite honestly, because there were 50 and 60 people. You just can't get anything done, on the subject of DEP with 50 people. And being very focused and have clear leadership, and then as the messaging starts to what are the three, most important things that are going to be worked on, because, the problems will be vast and the solutions will be elusive. And so picking where you're going to really focus and bet your first 100 days. I agree with you. 100 days are really important because the governor will have to make a first budget address, Usually they get an extension into March when there's a change in transition like this. We'll see. But very quickly you have to address the budget. So it'll be pretty obvious, I think, pretty quickly,
Yeah.
to your point.
I would just add that we all kind of mentioned it. We're making George Helmy a celebrity suddenly, but you need someone who can point you to the route you have to take to get your priorities met. The other thing is she has yet to articulate what the priorities are. One of the early famous memes was when someone asked her, what's the first piece of legislation, and she couldn't answer that. I'm sure that in her head she's got them all, but I think that was early in the campaign, and she learned to be a much better candidate, I think, at the end. You mentioned Baraka. I just wanted to note that Baraka came in late, and part of the hand-wringing was that Baraka, who evidently represents all black voters in the state, right?
You found that out, right?
Yes, right. That the concern was that he wasn't on board, and a lot of other black leaders were not, they had to be asked, right? And so that helped a lot to write that campaign at the end. But I think articulating priorities and getting someone who can run that place, a strong chief of staff with ties to the legislature, or at least connections to it.
Okay. Any last thoughts on that, or we transitioned out? Okay.
We transitioned.
All right. I want to go to one of our Zoom questions, if that's all right. Do I have a moment to do that here? Let me start with this one, which is my father, the late Lou Gambaccini, would have been delighted by the voter turnout and the results in yesterday's elections, especially with Mikey Sherrill's win in New Jersey. As a baby boomer and a parent of a Gen Xer, I have been deeply concerned by the gerontocracy that we continue to nominate and elect to public service. My question is, going forward, how can we continue yesterday's generational shift of leadership to the younger generations whose future government is deciding now? And I think I see some of my students nodding about that.
I'm naming my band's next album, Gerontocracy.
That is-
One hell of a word.
That was my thinking as well. That's a great band name.
Word, yeah.
I think it's a good point. I think Republicans showed a lot of youthful enthusiasm in this campaign. I thought it was a lot of bro energy in that campaign, but they were youthful at the very least. I think the most potential is in the Democratic Party for there to be a youth movement. I mean, Mikey Sherrill's not old. What's she, 40?
She's
something?
53.
That's young.
That's young. That's
Very
Super young.
freaking
Some
young.
would say super young.
That's very young. It's very young.
Very young. But I think
Not
that
born in 61 either.
53 is a new 33.
Marie and I were talking this morning about how to bottle that. I mean, this is New York, but Mamdani, I mean, you want to bottle whatever he had. That's what you want to do as Democrats or Republicans, for that matter. So I think it's possible. The Zoomer makes a good point, though. Is that a word, Zoomer?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is now.
Zoom, zoom,
Right
zoom.
ahead.
I guess I would say, I think New Jersey isn't going to see something like what we're witnessing in New York with Mamdani. As exciting as it is, and
Locally,
to see,
maybe. Not statewide.
Right, not
Yeah, yeah,
statewide.
yeah,
I think we're seeing it locally. I mean, I think James Solomon is a close relative of Mamdani's politically, and I think we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm in Hudson County among progressive activists that there is, they sort of see a lot of hope and optimism from what's going on in New York, and that they could replicate that in Hudson County. I do think we are in a moment of political reform that began with the Andy Kim candidacy and the fight over the way our ballots are designed. We're kind of midway through that project, and I think what we're going to see, and I was here at an event a couple weeks ago, and the point was made that there are going to be at least 5 new state legislators who are part of that reform movement, and that we're going to see, and I know, like in my district in Essex County, our new legislator who's just got elected last night wants to start a progressive caucus in the legislature. So I think we're going to, I think we are going to see changes in the balance of power in the state legislature that moves away from the current leadership and away from the party bosses. And it'll be very interesting to see, you asked, what are we going to be watching? I don't know that this is part of the transition, but I know for me, because I care deeply about political reform, I'm going to be watching Mikey Sherrill to see how committed she is to working on this and to changing the power structures that we've been seeing, and to start, we need to see, not just younger candidates. We need to see competitive primary races in the Democratic Party, and we need to see change, and we definitely need to be challenging the gerontocracy of the state legislature. So it'll be interesting to see what role Mikey Sherrill plays in that. I'll say one more thing, because I'm not exactly on the George Helmy bandwagon, and I feel like, there was some really exciting things that happened in Phil Murphy's first term under the direction of Matt Platkin that was going right at the party bosses and right at political reform, and the arrival of George Helmy kind of put an end to all of that with Governor Murphy. So I would just say, I'd like to see, change come. I'll just stop there.
And I think what we're saying is, like, when it comes to him, I don't want to create a deity up here, like, but he just brought organizational discipline. I think that's all. I'm not speaking to all the other stuff.
Yeah, regardless of the policy.
Yes, I'm not speaking to all the other stuff.
The organization.
And I think you're right. I think organically, I think that you see young people agitating for change at almost every level of government. And with the demise to the county line, they have a new voice. So I think the person you're alluding to that may represent
Chicozy?
you. Yeah, Chicozy. Chicozy would not be an assemblyman if we had county lines.
Yeah.
Right? So Chicozy said, I care about my community. I'm going to work. I'm going to do the hard work. I'm not going to go online and tweet and all that. I'm going to do the hard work of organizing to become a chairperson of a very marginalized ward in Newark and create my power from there. And I'm not asking for permission from the mayor, from the chairman. That's what I'm going to do. And now they have that coalition you're talking about, and you're seeing that at almost every. I'm a DNC member. I see it at my DNC meetings. Young people agitating, pushing.
Yeah, Katie Brennan is another one.
Yes,
from Hoboken.
And I feel, as Nancy said, Andy Kim was the beginning of this last year, that we're still in a transition period. I had a colleague of mine who's not in politics but works for the Ledger and Ninja.com asked me after Mandami's big primary victory, why didn't we see Raz Baraka do the same thing in New Jersey? Why did Mikey Sherrill win the primary? And there's a number of factors of that, but the overall, and I thought about this, and the one idea is that New York City is a city, aside if you take out Staten Island, like it's a young, like working class, progressive bastion, and New Jersey is a large state with wide swaths of suburbs and red areas, and there's still change in the air, and that you still have the older generations as the majority of voters, and younger voters are still coming in there. So I still feel like we're going to see New Jersey undergo more revolution in the coming years.
Fun factoid, two of the candidates for city council in Jersey City who are in runoffs, two socialists.
Very
So
good. I thought you were going to name that George person again.
No,
I got excited.
He only paid me $20.
All right.
Done.
Another question, very policy-specific question from online. Now that we have our new elected governor, can we expect the Immigrant Trust Act to advance in our legislature and get to the governor's desk during the lame duck? In what ways can we keep immigrants safe in the new administration? So immigration, obviously a big issue here.
I say yes. I say it'll get done during the lame duck, and that was always the plan. But
That's
I don't know. I don't have
possible.
any. I'm just saying off the, my own opinion.
It's very possible that she never took a really strong stance on it during either the primary or the general.
But she quoted the Statue of Liberty last night.
She did. I did like the image of like the sun rising over the Statue of Liberty, and like you can see Lower Manhattan from it.
Morning in New Jersey.
Yeah, but so she said that she wants to respect the rule of law and that people should have due process. She didn't go as far as Cettarelli said he wanted to get rid of the Immigrant Trust Act and that we do it on day one. But she hasn't taken a real strong stance on it, which is kind of true of a lot of policies of her. So maybe we'll have to see. But yeah, there hasn't been much movement on that in the legislature, and maybe she takes a step now that she's won so decisively, and she tells State Senate President Nick Scutari and State Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin, like, now it's time to get done. But this is the kind of stuff we'll find out in the coming weeks.
Yeah, this is another example, right, of the transition. This is a key, this is a very important period where you can get things done and not have to wear the badge right after the inauguration. So this will be another key indicator about what her priorities are going to be and what she wants to get off the table before she gets into office.
But just to be clear, Phil Murphy could do this. If he can wrangle Scutari, I think Coughlin would be easier to wrangle, but if he can get the legislature to
That's
do it,
true.
he can do it before
Oh, no, that's what I
leaving
mean.
office.
That's what I agree with you
Yeah.
100%. Getting these things off the table, yeah, Phil's got to cooperate, absolutely.
I say it's a no. I don't think that, I mean, the lame duck is a possibility for sure, but even in throughout this whole process, the Democrats, the leadership anyway, hasn't shown any real interest in it. But Mikey Sherrill did say during, we had her on a debate in that other place I used to work at, where she said that she did not want to see that formalized because then it would be easier to challenge in court, was her rationale for it. And that's a lot of progressives were a little ticked off about that, and that's fueled the narrative that progressives were, not happy with her.
Yeah.
We're going to stay home, which it turns out didn't happen. But so I'm a no. I don't think it's going to happen. It certainly is not going to happen during her administration because I don't think it's a priority for her at all.
Back to my questions. Sorry. I'm no George, what's his name, but last election, 2024 presidential election, we saw a lot of the conversation around the shifting arrows in New Jersey, even though obviously Biden won. We saw, or excuse me, faux pas there, Harris won, or lost rather, was on the ticket. We saw a lot of those arrows change, but now it's gone the other way. What explains that turnaround from a presidential election to a gubernatorial election? And what about the demographic changes? We heard a lot of conversation about Passaic County and the Latino vote. What kinds of dynamics were at play that made this different, and what might it mean going forward for midterms?
I think it's.
Confusing New York Times map.
Yeah,
with all
the
the
arrows, the red arrows this way, the blue arrows going
read
there.
that thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my reaction has been, again, we'll hear more and more, has been that there was a strong ground game in this campaign at the end in terms of some of those communities. And there wasn't really, in terms of at the 24 presidential. And so we were able to capture that momentum at a much higher level without having to have the ground game. Trump didn't need a ground game, really, I don't think, in New Jersey, and we were able to capture the enthusiasm. And so that would be the thing I would probably point to in terms of, the differences. And, I live in Morris County. It was very surprising, right, in terms of the Morris County, because there was a lot of talk about trying to turn it out. And they're obviously, we're not successful in Morris County, as well as all the, I guess 6 counties, right,
Yes.
that reversed, from the 2024.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for my esteemed panelists. And this really is a real question because I'm thinking about how to answer you, and I'm thinking, 2024, we had just been through a really ugly primary fight between Andy Kim and Tammy Murphy. And the county political party organizations, and particularly the county Democratic Party organizations, had really taken it on the chin with the fight over the ballot and how much the party committees were going to have control over the ballot design. I'm trying to not say county line, but it's kind of hard not to. And I'm wondering what you all think about, like, is it possible that the county organizations were just in no, and with Kim at the top of the ticket for the state, were they just in no mood to like work hard to get out the vote, or didn't have the capacity to do the thing that the machines are built to do, to get out the vote in 2024, and now we've seen sort of their reemergence of like, this is their role, get people knocking on doors and get out the vote.
I never thought of that, but that's actually, that's interesting. Because that was the thought, was the machine going to come out for her this time, and clearly that definitely helped. Again, New Jersey might be in a transition mode, and everybody's still trying to figure out their role. I do know that we are a state famous for transactional politics, and that if anything can get a deal done, it doesn't matter who's on the ballot or whatnot, they're going to get that deal done. So that'll be interesting to watch next year, to also see if there's any kind of new alliances that are formed. But it's different. Basically, we're going in with the same setup we had for 8 years. It's going to be a Democratic legislature and a Democratic governor. So the days of a George Norcross cutting a deal with Chris Christie, or Nick Scutari cutting a deal with Brian Stack, who knows? But I'm sure that'll still go on, because this is Jersey. So,
I mean, that's for sure that's going to go on.
Yes.
I mean, most young people, I think, see very little difference between Republicans and Democrats, because I think they both, on the bigger scale, represent just different corporate interests. But in New Jersey, as I said, there's two socialists on the ballot in Jersey City. New Jersey is in a period of transition, but I don't think it means the end of the county parties or county bosses, for that matter. There's a reason that they have had that system since forever. They got the most stuff. They got the most people. They got the most money. Most of those people are part of the existing governmental infrastructure. So the party's always going to be the party and always going to have the power. The question is, when you get someone who came in from outside of that, or are we going to have to figure out what to call candidates who win post-line, but what does that part, how does a James Solomon, right, who's a progressive, what's the party under James Solomon? Because the infrastructure and all of that stuff is there. It's hard for anybody. I always say everyone's a reformer until they become an incumbent. And so that's the real question, is how much real change can the newcomers, the fresh faces, the progressives make in a party infrastructure that's designed to keep you in line?
I also think all these deals get a lot harder financially, right? Because there's a lot of this is about money, and where does it go, and where do the projects go?
Christmas tree
and
items and all that,
yeah, and so this is all at the time when I think there are counter pressures, and Nancy, to your point, right, about new people coming in and wanting a different agenda. They're going to be independent in the assembly, probably, and I think it's going to get a lot harder to cut those deals and figure out what their priorities are with all new people coming in.
And I think last year the party I think the county organizations got caught flat-footed, and I think that, Andy Kim was not for them an inspirational, like top of the ticket kind of like New Jersey politician. Right. And Andy didn't play that game, but Andy played a different game. Yeah. And so like,
they really don't care about national politics.
Not at all. Not at all.
And Andy Kim played that game only because of the times that we were in, made it possible for him to have.
You mean he doesn't really believe?
No, of course he does.
I'm thinking about the game of expectations, and obviously Mamdani in New York has sort of knocked the lid off of a lot of barriers, and there's going to be a ton of expectations, perhaps unreasonable, reminiscent of Barack Obama. But I do think we have to think about here in New Jersey what the expectations are with this 13-point win for Mikey Sherrill, now the governor-elect. If you were advising her going forward, I know Ronald Reagan, when he came in office, they were set on we're going to accomplish two things. We're going to raise taxes and we're going to rebuild the military. That was like their first year's agenda. What are the two items that if you were, sharing your thoughts with her, you'd say, you know what, if you get these done your first year, year and a half, I think you're going to quite possibly put yourself in a position to be a two-term governor going forward. What are those two things that she can do and maybe that she should do going forward?
I mean, I think transit is a big statewide issue. Creating some in South Jersey might be something that she would want to do, but I think that the activists won't let it go. We need to find a funding source for NJ Transit. I think that's fundamental to New Jersey. I mean, you got to be able to get around. You got to be able to have a way for people to get around to attract people to come here. I think that's important. And then she's got to figure out a budget that is going to collapse pretty quickly with no federal support like they had during the COVID era. So that's a big thing. I think transit would be a big victory for her if she could say, oh, look, we created this thing that's going to fund transit going forward. So I think on a very practical level, that's something she needs to figure out. And I don't know that she's going to be able to freeze utility rates legally. So when that fails, what are you going to do to create an environment where the pressures that you create are downward on utility costs?
Thank you. Other advisors want to chime in, or you're just going to let it all collapse and not?
He's going to say hire George Helmy.
No, I think it's pretty self-evident. You're right. Transportation. That's one thing that this current administration hasn't solved. Like there's a bunch of things that she will walk in and not have to do because of this current administration. But one of the things she's going to focus on, like a laser beam, is that, and then the rise of utility costs. She's going to have to address that. Again, don't know. From everyone I talk to, they're more long-term solutions to that problem. So they have to figure that piece out, and I'm quite sure there'll be smart people who can help her figure that piece out. But if I was advising her, I would have her focus in on that like a laser beam and continue to bash Trump.
But she promised property taxes, right? She talked about it. She's got to figure out. And if I would go look at all the relief programs and consolidate them, right? Re-engineer all the Stay in New Jersey and all the other programs and try to create something that's much more widespread and everybody can understand, because she promised that. And then education funding. It's bubbling up, and there's a lot going on the education side. If she doesn't talk to that, I think she will lose a lot of the enthusiasm.
Again, the legislature has to carry the weight there. That's why it's so important that she be able to establish good working relationships with them. Maybe that's a big policy priority, is learn how to talk to these people.
Go right ahead.
I'll jump in
Nancy,
with just a couple quick things.
Do not push back again.
I think Phil Murphy had a pretty good first couple of years, and he raised the minimum wage. He got paid sick leave. He got his stuff. He had a rocky relationship, but with the legislature, but he got these things ultimately done. And I think in my opinion, his biggest failing has been that he really doesn't have the appetite to administer the state of New Jersey. He doesn't care about running programs and running them well and running agencies. And that is kind of my optimistic hope for Mikey Sherrill. As a resident of New Jersey, I would really like to see her come in and focus right away on good government and making government function better, so that when you have a problem and you pick up the phone, you get an actual person on the line that helps you. And you don't have the governor on a public radio show saying, oh, I'll get my guy to call you, because that only helps one person. But make the agency work so your guy doesn't have to call. And that's something he never had an appetite for. And my sense of her is that she does have an appetite for this. She talks about, competence and competency in good government. Let's see if she can pull it off.
Yeah. That was a Chitterelli talking point, by the way.
Real idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we are now prepared to unleash the gerontocracy busters with some Q&A. So those of you that want to shred the gerontocracy with a question from our audience, our youthful audience,
trying
we
to
have
use
a
the language,
microphone. I
aren't
don't
you?
know. We have a
Shred.
mic going around. So if anyone has a question, we'd love to. We have several up here, so you can introduce yourself and tell us your Rutgers affiliation.
All right. Hi, my name is Miriam. I'm in Dr. Ambar's class. We're currently having it right now, basically. Last night, I covered Mikey Sherrill's watch party for WRSU FM New Brunswick.
I'm an alum.
Shout out to you.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk more about the gender aspect of this election. So obviously it was mentioned before that she's the first Democratic female governor in New Jersey. I kind of was thinking about how little she really appealed to that in her campaign. She really appealed more to like the military veteran aspect. She had the helicopter icon in her lawn signs. She really appealed more to that more masculine coded aspect of her life. So I was wondering, how much do you think like she really engaged in identity politics? Honestly, like how did Cheryl's identity as a woman, first and foremost, impact her campaign? And would have appealing to her gender in 2025 helped or hurt her campaign?
That's a great question, and just real quick, I'm going to let Jean talk about this mostly, but because I just want to note that she did mention that she was a mom of 4 a lot, but yeah, definitely the helicopter, she leaned into that. Like all of us, like were like, oh yeah, that's right, you're a helicopter pilot. So, but Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really interesting because it was sort of a difference with some earlier elections we saw, especially like if you think the Hillary campaign in 2016, which is different, obviously presidential, but it's like women for Hillary was everywhere and really leaned into the gender aspect. And what we've seen in more recent years is women candidates not shying away from their gender, but not necessarily highlighting. And we didn't see that in this campaign, in my opinion. I didn't feel that there wasn't a, women for Cheryl kind of energy out there in that way. It's not to say that they weren't, because very clearly they were for her. But we do know that women candidates have to emphasize this. We know this from the research. Have to emphasize their qualifications and their competency more than male candidates do. And I think we did see her do that, and we saw that sort of coming out a lot. And she did mention that she was a mom, so there's like the authenticity piece of it, of like using her life experience without saying, but constantly I'm a woman. But it is obviously relevant to what's going on. I mean, you mentioned the bro culture Machiavelli campaign. I mean, there was some hyper-masculinity happening. We've seen that at the national level, and I did feel that here. It was interesting as a dynamic. I don't really have an answer for you except to say, look, she won women, particularly women of color, and they came out for her. So it's not that the women's vote, it's not that it wasn't there or that, I don't know, maybe she just didn't need to lean into it in the same kind of a way. But it is striking that, again, as I said earlier, women and people of color are at the top of this blue wave time, or like the sweep was really very much. And so I would also say, because David, I'm not pushing back on you, I'm adding nuance. You mentioned that young people may see the parties the same way. There's a big difference between the way young women and young men see the parties. And I think that is worth examining and thinking about. The Democratic Party should be thinking about that. The Republican Party should be thinking about who they're appealing to and why, the role that gender plays in it. I mean, in my personal opinion, some of this is a real big pushback to the hypermasculinity we're seeing at the national level and the messaging and all that. I do think young women are pretty fed up, and I think we see that anyway. So I mean, there's a lot more that I could say about that, but that's my impression.
I would just make one last comment, if you don't mind.
Please,
I mean, I've run for office as a female. I was happy with how that was positioned, right? I don't like it when I see female candidates saying, vote for me because I'm a woman, and really pushing, the gender identity. And she did, but Jack talked about he had 4 kids too. You know, I mean, they
Right,
both
true,
talked about their families. But he, you know, so I was actually, I think it's a good evolution of, you know, females in politics. And I think Debbie was talking about this when we were, you know, prepping up for the session about, you know, women can win. Oh, you said it. I'm sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
women
yeah,
women
well,
can win.
question.
You know, you don't
Yeah.
have to like play it like it's an obligation to vote for a woman.
Well, and I will say, to your point, I think it is a good evolution. They both talked about their children, but women candidates in the past have been kind of told to keep their children, like don't mention it maybe so much because voters will wonder why you're not home with them. But now they feel like they don't have to keep highlighting it in the same way I'm a woman candidate, but they can talk about their children more freely, and it's less of a concern.
I will say that I felt, you mentioned Hillary Clinton, I felt like that was a bigger selling point during her campaign, and a lot less so.
Definitely.
with
Well,
Mikey.
it's certainly much bigger in the messaging, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And it was something that became a piece of, like, an identity piece of the campaign, for sure, yeah.
We
Turns
have
out she's a
another
helicopter
question up
pilot.
here, if we could. Again, your name and Rutgers affiliation.
Hi, my name is Kieran. I'm currently a grad student at Rutgers Business School in the Masters of Accountancy program because I hate myself. I'll have relevance on April 15th, though.
Yeah.
Really quickly, going back to the idea of like lessons learned, I think a lot of progressives are going to take like Mamdani's victory and some of the performance of Omar Fatah in Minneapolis as an example of Dempsey to be moving to the left. Moderates might take Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger as an example of moving more moderate. Then you'll have people like Ezra Klein who are saying we need to broaden it on both sides. So I guess, in your opinion, what would you say is the example Democrats should take away? Do we need to be moving left, moving to the center, moving in all directions?
I think that the results from last night really back up what Ezra Klein has been arguing. I mean, and just without even having to go very far, like just between New York and New Jersey, to have Mamdani have such a convincing victory in New York and Mikey Sherrill such a convincing victory in New Jersey. And to me, you know, that's the argument he's been making, which maybe not everyone's been following it, but that the Democratic Party needs to put up candidates who can win in the district they're running in, and that we need to broaden the tent. The Democrats need to broaden the tent and have tolerate a much wider view of what your politics are, what you will tolerate from candidates around the country, so that somebody running in Nebraska should not be anything like somebody running in New York. And I think, you know, as I said before, New Jersey is a statewide New Jersey election is not going to look like a New York City election, and I think that's precisely the argument that he's been making. It's not a contradiction. It's not a confusion. It's a way of thinking about a coalition building, something the Republican Party is very, very good at. They are in power today because of their ability to hold their coalition.
I think more importantly than moving to the left or the right for the Democratic Party, it's to commit to the right or the left, because Democrats, they vacillate, you know, they qualify, they do all these things to not necessarily support this thing or not support this thing. And so Republicans, whatever you think of their policies, they're on that shit. They're like, this is where we all stand, and this is what we stand for. Democrats, I mean, there's a wide swath of opinions there, and maybe that's why they seem to, you know, be all over the place and not focus on a specific policy. But the Immigrant Trust Act is a perfect example here in New Jersey, which is a favorite of progressives, favorite of people on the left. But the Democrats in the state legislature say, oh no, we got too many citizens who, you know, don't want immigrants to have rights. So the Democrats, if they want to be progressives, then they should be progressives. If they want to be centrist, then they should be centrist. But they're all over the map, I think. And that's a problem for the party, despite the results of yesterday, which showed that their blue is back.
Well, one of the jokes is that Republicans fall in line and Democrats eat their own. And I think that's I mean, it's probably too broad a joke, but and like I said before, New Jersey's a transactional state, especially on the Democratic side, and there will be growing pains, and there will be all kinds of deals, and there will be all kinds of fights. And as we learned from the first year of Phil Murphy's governorship, when Steve Sweeney basically called Phil Murphy Donald Trump at one point, and Murphy's team called me and was like, "What?" So, there's going to be all those kind of things going on, especially because you have someone coming from D.C. who hasn't served in Trenton before. She has the chance to do the funniest thing ever, by the way, and make Jack Citarelli your chief of staff. 'Cause he's someone who does know Trenton very well, and that would just be you want to get some headlines. Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And the Democratic tent is so big. It's just it's at times it can feel untenable, to be
Yeah, it's
frank.
unwieldy.
And to get all that stuff moving in the same direction with one singular message is damn near impossible, to be frank. And so I think that is, and I agree with Nancy. I think there has to be grace. If you are a Democrat in the House from Brooklyn, you have to give grace to a Democrat from Western Pennsylvania, right? Their constituencies are dramatically different. What the constituencies care about are dramatically different. And so what we get caught up is this purity test.
Right.
One size fits all. Doesn't work that way. And there's no way we're going to be competitive in elections nationally. We're not going to be able to have a singular voice if you don't all provide grace and get on the same page.
Or you get a Donald Trump type character who just mows
Yes.
through any kind of opposition, which I'm not recommending. I'm just saying.
Thank you for that. We have one over here. I think it's, I recognize this person.
Hello. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Rafael Escalante. I'm an Eagleton undergraduate associate and former student of Dr. Amber. Thank you for being here. We've talked a little about Mikey, and I want to talk a little bit about Jack. What's next for him? I think he ran a very good campaign compared to Mikey. I agree with you, Mr. Cruz, that Mikey's campaign wasn't the best at the
Till
beginning.
the end.
You
Till
got
the end.
support. You got support.
Oh, see, thank you for not pushing back.
But you have Mike Crispy, who 2 hours ago just tweeted that he's the future of the Republican Party here in New Jersey. You have people like Nick Fuentes now being embraced by prominent Republican organizations at the national level. So do you think there is still a place for people like Jack Citarelli? I can never pronounce it.
Citarelli.
Like him
Citarelli.
in the New Jersey Republican Party. That's my overall question.
So
Thank you.
I'll start. I was actually at the his event last night. I heard his remarks at the very end. I would never speak for Jack, so I can only report kind of what he said, and then I'll make a comment about the Republican Party. So I said before, I think that the primary was very harmful in New Jersey. The Republican primary was very harmful, and there was a continuing agitation on the fringes of the party, and you're going to have a lot of people now claim they're the future of Republicans in New Jersey. Was that a comment on me? Or so there'll be a lot of people who are going to claim that, but I think we'll have to find the center again. And Jack expressed last night that he doesn't intend on leaving New Jersey. He intends on continuing to fight for the issues. And every party, and I think maybe this is part of what Mo was saying, every party needs loyal opposition. Right, that's how they firm up positions and they figure out, what is it that we are going to fight about. And so I think Republicans will go through some soul searching. I think next year will probably continue to be a very difficult, probably environment, be my guess, in New Jersey politics. But coming into then the next round, I think, of gubernatorial and the rebuilding, you'll see that there'll be, whether it be Jack or whoever, but it'll be much more, I think, appealing to the moderate much more than the extreme, because there isn't that much of a center, I don't think, to build off of yet in New Jersey, beyond South Jersey, which actually, as the results showed, South Jersey didn't hold together either, in terms of the Republican strength. And so I think it'll be a while, but I think there will be place, and because I think we believe, my last comment would be, we believe, right? And there are many examples of good government needs to be reestablished in New Jersey, not just the MVC being able to issue a real ID in the same hour, DEP being able to issue permits in less than 30 days, the ability for Treasury to not hold on refunds, and unemployment checks to be issued the next week when you really need them. So I think that those are the things that I hope that will rebuild around in terms of the Republican Party.
I do know it's a very bold take to look at last night's results and go, you know what, we need to be closer to the Donald Trump model. That is a, we're going to win over more people by, having Donald Trump come here. So I don't know if we'll see the party do that. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you have Mike Crispy thinking that he's the future of the Republican Party, nope, he's not listening. But I also think they're going to be the more interesting party to watch for folks like us who cover this stuff, because, I mean, John Bramnick, who is the moderate's moderate, he's state senator, he might have played better than Chitterelli to voters, but as Regina pointed out, that primary was really ultimately a death knell for the candidate.
John was on the radio last night, right? John
He
was
was
on the
on
radio last night talking about how he didn't feel engaged in the Republican Party, didn't feel engaged in this campaign. And Bill Spade has been on the radio every day talking about what he thinks ought to be done differently, in the Chitterelli campaign.
Yeah.
So it was very destructive, in terms of that's the process that we're going to have to go through.
I think we have somebody in the back here. Let's bring in another student voice.
Hi, my name's Philip Bassick, and I'm a senior at Rutgers. I'm also a student of Dr. Ambar. So there was talk about building a coalition amongst Democrats, and there's a new face in New York City, Imam Dani now, a progressive, whereas Mikey Sherrill is a moderate. What type of cooperation could we see, maybe even in new forms of cooperation between New Jersey and possibly New York, where there's been some kind of breakdown between New Jersey and New York and things like transportation? Someone spoke about how Mikey Sherrill needs to focus on transportation upcoming, whereas the Hudson Tunnel project was canceled by Donald Trump, and our transportation relies heavily on New York City. And when congestion pricing was put in New York City, Phil Murphy's first response was to go to the courts and complain and complain and complain. Where can we see coalition building and working together between the two? A big face now in New York City and nationally in Mamdani, as well as
the most obvious
in New
place.
Jersey.
I mean, you'll probably see her and Mamdani form an alliance on Gateway if this project really is canceled. One day it's canceled, the next day it's a negotiating tactic, so who knows. But yeah, that's one thing you'll definitely see. And you saw Eric Adams and Phil Murphy often had that kind of relationship because they knew that New York City and New Jersey are really hand in glove.
Yeah, I would agree with that, transportation is going to be, anything that's practical is a good place for them to start to try to work together and understand one another and see how they can work together going forward. But, transportation is something, particularly in North Jersey, that affects millions of people, and the economy in this area, in the tri-state area really, is so dependent on the tunnels, the Gateway project. So I think it's an easy sell for any governor or mayor or county executive to say that that's something that we have to work on. How do you get a socialist to share the same thought policy-wise with a helicopter pilot is going to be interesting to watch. They're both Democrats, but they're in separate lanes in the Democratic Party.
Go ahead.
So, I'll go. So I think there's an urgency right now in the immediate for Mamdani and the governor-elect to come together and figure out the approach towards Gateway. Right, I think that's the immediate, and you're going to see that probably start happening right away. But even more interesting than that is what happens internally within New York. So you're going to have Mamdani, you need Schumer, you need Jeffries, you need all of that stuff to come together as well. So it's just not even a New York-New Jersey dynamic, it's the internal New York dynamic that
Right.
Mamdani has to And not just him, his other political sort of colleagues have to sort of navigate so they can sort of move the city, the state, and us, the region forward.
The one also constituency we haven't really talked about at all today is the business community, right? I mean, you don't need trains going into New York if there aren't strong jobs that are there. And it's very interesting, I think, that Steve Fulop is going to be taking over, right? The business advocacy group, in New York City. So, I mean, the economic matters, I think, which is why you need transportation and, they're a hand in glove kind of. But the business community is one that was never really prominent at all in the governor-elect's campaign. And I don't really know what she thinks about tax incentives and what she thinks about jobs. But, we have a very high unemployment rate in New Jersey right now, higher than the average and higher than the region. And that's going to be something that will be, very related to the jobs that are in New York and how well, the earners who go to New York, will they be able to continue to, live in New Jersey and be able to provide the economic, fodder that they do.
Nancy, you wanted to get in the last word on this?
I think it's a potential win-win for Mamdani and Cheryl to show that they are not ideological, but they are pragmatic and they care about good government and government functioning and things like jobs and transportation. And that's what they've been saying. And here, so I would be, I'd be surprised if we don't see them recognizing that it's a total win-win for them to come out of the gate strong, working together to make lives better for both New Yorkers and New Jersey residents.
It'll be interesting to see the Mamdani candidate versus Mamdani running the city, right? Because the reality of the position you're in, the limits of your authority and power, it comes crashing down on you, and you realize what you can and can't do, right? The limits of, because there are limits to your sort of authority. And what's interesting, and you remember this, David, I remember when Ras Baraka first became mayor of Newark, the business community was frightened to death. They, oh my God, this radical's gonna come, he's gonna tear this place apart. Booker had done so many good things over the years, and now we have this guy. And the reality of the position helped guide how he manages the city. If you ask anybody in sort of corporate like Newark right now, they all give him like A's, A pluses.
And better than Cory Booker.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's what they do. Although they're wrong, but that's what they.
I figured you'd say that.
Well, listen. So I think it was a Cuomo who said you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. It was the elder Cuomo, if I'm not mistaken, on that. We have maybe time for two more. One more. Okay, one more. Right here.
No pressure.
Yeah.
All right. Good morning. I am David Fishkin. I'm a student in Amber's class. Great class, by the way. I have a quick question I'm just going to read from my notes. Do you think there's a correlation of sorts between autocracy and caution, especially amid a more competitive political environment? Correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe a lot of judgment comes from a candidate's level of experience or perception thereof. In that sense, do you think parties are now less likely to invest in a younger candidate under more scrutinized or competitive races? Indeed, Mamdani won the New York mayoral race, but his victories were often spoken of more as an upset or something not expected.
Okay.
I mean, it was part of your question, is the party going to make room for young people? I don't think they have I'm talking about New Jersey. I don't think they have a choice now because, I mean, years from now, we'll realize how important and critical to the future of this state the death of the party line was. We haven't seen it entirely yet, but that's coming. And, the party bosses don't know how to deal with that yet. So I think that's going to be important.
And that is the lesson of the Mamdani victory. I think the whole Democratic Party is going to be looking for fiery young people to run as candidates across the country now.
Yeah, another way of saying it, right? Candidates matter, right? Resumes are all well and good, but the candidate being charismatic as he was, and the ability to really bring out people,
knowing how to operate in the attention economy.
Yep.
Being his
That's
authentic
huge.
self.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, listen, I don't know how you feel. I feel blessed to have been here. It's exciting. Early as many of you have gotten up today, probably a late night for lots of folks, and especially for our panelists, but you really enriched us with your insights and expertise, so we can't thank you enough. We're really fortunate. Please, let's hear it for our panelists. As we close, I just want to, again, thank you for joining us in person and through the webinar. Before you leave, please take a moment to complete the survey that will appear at the end of the webinar. For more information and to access a recording of this conversation, please visit eagleton.rutgers.edu. This has been The Morning After. Thank you once more.